having been talking to you on and off on Twitter for months now, we finally decided that we would get something together, and we're doing it for International Women's Day, which seemed like a brilliant day to do it. So first of all, I mean, obviously I know you do the photography and you've talked about your radio drama and things, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a photographer and a writer. I started writing after my photography, and my parents had a shop making theatre costumes. So I was growing up around people who made stuff. And when I went into doing my photography, I knew that it takes time to make stuff. And so my passion has always been about something from nothing, asking people, looking at people who make something. And so my photography is usually about heritage, manufacturing, arts, dance, and then it moved into motorsport because I was working at a magazine, and they sent me to Goodwood Revival when it first started, late 90s. And that got me into loving motorsport. And then the motorsport got me into loving women in motorsport. And then that got me into loving the history of women in motorsport, because that's what I've always been interested in anyway, the historical side of life between the wars, all the Bloomsbury sets, all the arts and crafts movement. So it was completely natural for me to look at the history of women in motoring. And that's how I came to know the VSCC, really, the pre-war years, and looking at the library. And that's how I started writing my radio drama. But the photography takes me everywhere. And I have absolutely been suffocated for the last year, because photography, you can still take photographs every single day, and I do, but I like it to be with a purpose and showing a story and the reason for it. So taking pictures of scenery and things is just not part of my makeup, unless it is part of that story.
And with the vintage cars, I think because the cars themselves have so much character about them, they're brilliant. I mean, we have one of the ladies that's provided a story for International Women's Day is Rhiannon Carville-Cook, who's one of our fabulous photographers, and just the character that she gets out of some of her shots are absolutely amazing.
And it's the people, the stories behind the people, how they became, how they got into the families, inherited them, great aunts, great uncles, grandparents, or they bought them with a stroke of luck and fortune and luck. But the whole thing about my photography is all interlinked, because I've made a book about Harris Tweed, and I made a book about whiskey, and and then I'm into motor racing, and you think, God, they're all so disparate, but they're not, because Harris Tweed, people used to race in Harris Tweed, you know, at Goodwood, he used to get people to race in tweeds because it was a fire retardant and really hard wearing, and then afterwards they could go in for a gin at the house, so they'd look smart anyway. And then whiskey is all part of it, because everyone, you know, whiskey is such a historical thing. It's, you know, everyone has whiskey. And so my Harris Tweed and my whiskey book and my motorsport is all really connected. And it all harks back to being yesteryear rather than contemporary, I suppose.
For me, I've spoken a few times now about how the VSCC has a long tradition of women being involved right from the start, not just racing, but on committees and in the background and everything. So who are some of the women that you have found sort of particularly pre-war that have inspired you and whose stories you've really been taken by? Nice wide question for you.
There's an enormous list. So my favourite, of course, is Mildred Bruce, the Honourable Mrs. Victor Bruce. I've written a radio drama about her, and that's winding its way through the powers that be. She was, let's begin. She got caught for speeding on her brother's motorbike at the age of 15, but they couldn't do anything about it because they didn't know what speed she was doing. She had a child out of wedlock in the 20s. She won the Coupe de Dame in 1927 of the Monte Carlo Rally. She did the Swedish rally. She drove 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle. She did reliability trials around Africa and Europe for AC, Selwyn Edge and AC. She broke lots of records at Montlhéry, 10 days, 10 nights. She tested the Bentleys for the Bentley boys before they raced at Le Mans. She was a wing walker. She flew solo to Japan, the first woman to fly solo to Japan, and then carried on flying around the world. Friends with Amelia Earnhardt, also friends with Malcolm Campbell. So she was a speed. She did speed on. She did speed. She was a speed woman on motorsport on the water as well. And she was the first person to put an air hostess in the air called Daphne between London and Paris.
That's fabulous.
So she's amazing. She's brilliant. Mildred Bruce is just brilliant. Then I've just written an article about Helenice, Bugatti Queen. And lots of people always thought that she was a lot more glamour than speed, but she raced 31 Grand Prix and came pretty much at the top of the Coupe de Dame in all of them. But then she had a disastrous relationship, and she got left penniless. But also her career ended really abruptly because during the war they thought she was having an affair with the German, and she became a spy. But I don't think she did. After reading lots of her history, I don't think she was a spy. Unlike Anne-Cécile Itier, who I think was a spy, another Bugatti lady, pre-war lady. She raced all sorts of different cars, but she had an affair with the same guy that Helenice did, but she did this Morocco rally, and the Germans were doing the reconnaissance over Morocco for mapping, and she was kind of with them a bit. So I reckon Anne-Cécile Itier is a little bit dodgy. I don't know. I have to read up more of her. You've got lovely Doreen Evans, who raced at Brooklands a lot. Oh my God, there's so many women. Kay Peter, who painted her cars pale blue like her overalls. Madame Junek, who had all yellow Bugattis. She was one of the first people to think of the tulip maps, because she did the reconnaissance around the Targa Florio, and she painted chalk corners. So turn right, hump back, turn left, turn right. So she did the reconnaissance and painted all these marks on the road. And she was called the Queen of the Steering Wheel, because she just could get in and out of these corners quickly because she knew where they were. She never won the Targa Florio. She crashed out, but she was good. And she was, I think, the forebearer of the tulips map way before Jenks and Sterling Moss did their toilet roll contraption, the rally contraption. So she's really good. And then who else have you got? The inventor of the rear view mirror is Dorothy Levitt. In 1904, she said, hold up a glass mirror on a stick, not only good for putting your lipstick on, but seeing what's behind you. And then in 1914, they put the rear view mirror up. So there's a few women I like. There's just a few.
I'm obviously a little bit after that time period, but having mentioned Sterling Moss, obviously Pat Moss for a long time was hugely underrated as a female driver, but she was probably every bit as talented as he was.
Yeah, and she rallied with Annie Wisdom, who was Bill Wisdom's, Elsie Wisdom's daughter. Elsie Wisdom, or they call her Bill Wisdom, she raced at Brooklands, and she was really fast, Bill Wisdom. So Annie Wisdom, the daughter of Bill Wisdom, and her name's Elsie Wisdom, but her nickname was Bill. I don't know, so we'll call her Elsie, I think, for this. Elsie Wisdom. Daughter was Anne Wisdom, who raced with Pat Moss. So, yeah, lots of women before the war, and then I think the white goods came, and then everything changed. The fridge and the cooker.
Yes. But and as I said, we've had a history throughout, and I did a talk on revs, and I was talking about when I first started going along to vintage meetings in the 90s, there were a plethora of women then, not as many perhaps as we would have liked, but now you can go and you can see you know, Liz Corley doing her thing in Piglet, or Sue Derbyshire in her Morgan, and they're every bit as at the forefront of the women of the past. Where of course they've got less that they have to face now, and we're very lucky in the VSCC. We're much less discriminatory than a lot of clubs that I've worked in over the last 30 years as a marshal, but they're all still there and they're all still doing their thing. And most of them are turning their nose up at ladies' awards because they feel they're slightly patronising.
Yeah, I think, I mean, when the W Series started a few years ago, I was completely torn. My God, why do there have to be a separate women's series? But then now you look at all the women that have dispersed out into testing for the general racing circuits and racing for teams. It was the only way to kickstart again getting women out there, because if you're fast you can race, if you can prove it, why, you know, just race. Once you've got the helmet on, no one knows what you are. But there wasn't a kickstart for that to happen, so I'm really happy that the W Series did happen in the end. I'm you know, it's brilliant that it did.
Yeah, like you, I think I was in two minds about it a little bit to start with, because you do feel, well, we're doing this and it's, you know, is it patronising? And but actually, as you said, it does give that kickstart. It just makes people more visible, and I think that's a massive thing that we need to do at the moment, is just make people more visible. And it's one of the reasons why we're doing the event that this will be shown as part of, the International Women's Day, because actually they're all names that are known to club members, the people that are taking part in it, but it's giving them that little bit more visibility. And if a 16-year-old girl sees it, it's actually, do you know what, I can go out and play with classic cars, and it's not a bad thing.
I mean, it definitely is sort of starting at the school gates, and it depends where you live and how you've been brought up and what your parents do as well. But if you've got an idea at the school gates that there's someone on telly, or at the weekend that you've seen someone do something, just go ahead and do it as well. You just need a little, not a mentor, but the possibility that it can be done, that it really, there's nothing different about it. You know, you don't have to be a man or a woman, just go and do it if you fancy doing it. A friend of mine, Katerina Kaivalova, who races historic cars, she's just done the Cresta run.
Madness.
She's got stitches on her fingers, but a huge smile on her face.
Yeah, it's some of the things even women now are doing that are just pushing those boundaries are absolutely amazing. And she's a lovely lady as well. I've met her so many times at various things. She's raced with the club as well. But as you say, it's starting at the school gates as well. I mean, my daughter, we bought her her very own Austin 7 saloon called Magical Trevor. It's not fast and we're not pushing any boundaries with it. But do you know what? It's got the most smiles per mile out of any car we own, I think. And
smiles per mile. I love that. Smiles per mile.
You cannot help but grin when you drive this car. And we take her, when we can take her to school, we take her to school in it. We do the grocery shopping, and it's other people, as you say, seeing it and seeing it's not strange and that girls can like cars. And so it reminds me of another story when my daughter was at school when the World Cup was on, and they were allowed to watch the football as part of the after-school club. And one of the little boys turned around to Ellie and said, well, you can't watch it. Girls don't like football. Said, I don't care. I prefer Formula One anyway. I'm not sure where she gets her attitude from.
I mean, it is about the upbringing. It's about society and the upbringing. And sometimes you just can't change stuff. But when you can change things, there's the possibility of changing something. I mean, I love the idea that there's a girls go-karting, children's go-karting team in Northampton. They're everywhere, but the one in Northampton is just so strong and making sure girls are always go-karting. I mean, that's also because it's got Silverstone there. It's much easier to have that emphasis. And I think the new Silverstone Museum is probably, I don't know, I haven't really been there. I haven't been there for a year, but of course we haven't been there for a year. Oh God, it feels really weird. But I reckon they would get back into doing their outreach work again. And I worked at the British Motor Museum, and I did an exhibition called Car Stories, and I worked with 5-year-olds to 95-year-olds, boys and girls. The 5-year-olds drew and made their cardboard cars, and the girls' cars were bonkers and brilliant. And then we did an animation for the teenagers, and then the 95-year-olds were from the Star and Garter ex-servicemen. And then at the end, I got all the 5-year-olds and the 95-year-olds to talk to each other, and they were it was just interculture, interracial, inter-age. It was a brilliant reminiscence project, and everyone was just talking, and the idea was just tell us about your cars. And one of the little girls said to this older man, he said, so what car have you got? And she said, well, it doesn't like green petrol, it likes the other kind of petrol.
Oh, bless her. No, it's I think the great thing for me about the Vintage Sports Car Club as well is not just it's this place that's you've always been accepted as long as you like cars, but there's this massive intergenerational thing within the club as well. So we have so many 3-4 generations of family, and you can go have the same well, not quite the same conversation, but you can go and talk to great grandpa and have just as good a conversation with the 14-year-old grandson. And that's another brilliant thing, or 14-year-old granddaughter. Most of them are grandson at the moment, I think, because the daughters are all slightly older. They tend to wait until they can actually take part before we see them, whereas the boys tend to come along a little bit more earlier, I think. Not in all cases, but in some of them. But I mean, we've got a brilliant youth section in the club, and in that we've got some absolutely wonderful females in there. Rebecca Smith, who's driven Alistair Lockhart's Vauxhall on track. She trials in a Model A saloon as well. And, you know, seeing the girls of that age doing things that even, 20 years ago, I might have struggled with a little bit. And it's nice to see that coming down the generations too.
That is so gorgeous to see. And what I'd love to do is to tell them about these historic women, because I bet they don't know, because they're not learning that at school. And I bet their parents don't really know about these women. And I reckon if these young girls could hear about some of these women, I bet they'd be fascinated about who and what these women drove at Brooklands and at Goodwood and Paris-Madrid Rally, or the Peking to Paris, or flying. Or I reckon there's an idea there to tell these young girls at the VSCC about some of the stories of the older historic women.
Absolutely. And I think obviously you've said you've got the radio drama going through for Mildred Bruce, so we'll have to make sure they all know about that when that's available somewhere. But who else would you say would be, if they were going to research one woman, who should it be?
Oh my God, you have put me on the spot.
I have, I'm sorry.
Well, I've got to, I've said Mildred, Kay Peter, Jill Scott is a good woman. There isn't just one woman, because they all raced different cars, different series. It goes from, I can't answer. I physically can't answer, because there's so many different women. I mean, we've got some naughty women like Violet Morris. She was a bit daredevil, but I can't answer that question. There's too many. There's not just one. There's not just one woman that I could suggest that they look at.
I think what we'll do is, when we put the video up, perhaps if you give us some book suggestions for a variety of women, we'll make sure that's up with the link for the video as well.
Yeah, I've got some lovely books that you've got in the library as well, and there's some books that they can get on general list, and I can list them down so you can put them in the link below. There's a lovely book. I'm just going to look away from the camera. It's called Fast Ladies. You've got that in the library. That's a big book, and that's a really, really, really good Bible. It's just a good Bible. And there's another book called Atalanta, which I absolutely adore. It's out of print, but Might be able to find it somewhere. But then I've got all of Mildred's diaries. I've got stacks of them, stacks and stacks. And also what I love, I've gone off tangent, haven't I? I'm really sorry.
No, don't apologise.
what I love is that, so at the London Library, there is the archive of the Lady magazine. And the Lady magazine had a bi-monthly section called the Lady in Her Car. And that is fascinating to read. Anything from, I would say, 1920 to 1935. Every month there was 2 articles, and absolutely fascinating. It taught you how to tip, how to be courteous at the car park, how to treat the valet, what to wear. Now, after the First World War and between the First World War and the Second World War, corsets started to, get rid of corsets. And it was women in the motoring industry that really pushed that, because they couldn't drive in a corset. So they showed you what clothes to wear. And so there was whole articles about that, the fashion of driving, and also you couldn't just get somewhere in 20 minutes or an hour. It would take a good morning to get there. So they would tell you what picnics to take, what flasks to wear, the different overcoats to wear, and muslin scarves and gloves, and what to wear between the seasons whilst you're driving. And so the Lady was really, really good. And also about car parks in London, because the Ladies Automobile Club, which was at Claridge's, then moved to the Royal Automobile Club, there was car parking. And so you could pay 1 shilling or one pence for parking overnight and have your car filled up as well. And they would have gymkhanas. And you'd find out all about these gymkhanas in the Lady. So just as they'd be playing golf and swimming and sailing, they'd also be talking about the gymkhanas. So
I think having climbed in and out of an Austin 7 in a dress myself a few times, and arrived at events having done an hour in the Austin with my hair looking rather mad, I think I might need to go and read some of those for advice.
And it would show you what bobby pins to use and what pins to use, what would work and what didn't work. Because by the time you got somewhere, your hair would be a right mess. But did you know, who was it? Dorothy Levitt, again, with her rearview mirror. She also was pestering Selwyn Edge for days and days and days to put a glass screen in front of her steering wheel, because her gauze her muslin cape was being covered in flies. So they put in a windscreen. Woman.
Yes.
Woman.
We really should rule the world, shouldn't we?
We've got everything sorted out. The glove compartment, woman. Kay Peter and her gloves, woman.
Yes, was the pocket in the Mini that fits a bottle of Gordon's. That unfortunately was a male idea, I think, but it sounds like it should be a female one, shouldn't it? Make sure we've got room for the gin in the car.
Yeah, I think there'll be somewhere in the Lady that tells us there's a picnic. I mean, Rolls-Royce, obviously, I think were the first people to really, really put in the picnic hamper in the car, and have lots of places where you could absolutely have leisure, and your chauffeur could come and open up your picnic basket for you. I think Rolls-Royce did that. I mean, I've got a modern Land Rover. My Land Rover is 1964, so it's a bit too modern for the VSCC. But my picnic basket in the Land Rover is quite good, because we're always. I just have even if I'm not going out, I have lunch in the Land Rover. Put the tailgate down and have lunch in her.
I've got a picture at Prescott at one of our summer events of cooking stir fry on a little gas hob on the front of our Land Rover. It's interesting, because we were talking about this recently. Nearly a lot of the SEC families will have the expensive car like the 3098. They've nearly always got an Austin 7 as a stablemate, and most of us have got Land Rovers as well. It just covers everything that we need to do, really.
I just need a pre-war car and a modern car.
Yeah.
I'd like to have a motorbike as well, but yeah, I've really got the Land Rover for now.
It's still a
Someday.
fun car though.
It's a brilliant car. Yeah, I know. I'd love to have a pre-war car. I'd love to go and play out in that, but being a photographer and a writer, one can't just suddenly get all these things, you know.
No, unfortunately not.
I haven't got anyone to inherit it from yet.
So talking of you're going back to your camera and your writing, what's coming up for you now that we're coming out of lockdown? Have you got any more projects in the pipeline?
So it's just beginning again. I'm just organising a trip to the Monaco Grand Prix Historic, and I'd normally go with 2 or 3 clients in mind, with a commission from 2 or 3 clients, but I've got one confirmed client, and I'm probably just going to go with that, because I think for my mental health, I just need to go to do it, because it's brilliant. The Monaco Historic is just an amazing weekend. It's, you know, it's just, I can't say anything about it apart from it's just brilliant. And then I've got some writing stories to do. I'm working with Heritage Insurance, talking about historic women, so that's really cool. And then I'm working for another adventure magazine called Overland Journal, and I'm going to be doing some short overland expeditions in this country. Although we're coming out of lockdown, we're still in a very weird travel scenario. I mean, going to Monaco is kind of, how am I going to do it? What tests do I need and everything? But traveling around this country will be much easier. So I'm doing 4 stories over the year, but 2 immediately over that. So I'm doing that, going down to Cornwall, and then I'm doing a coast to coast. So I've got those stories happening, but corporate photography wise, it's not picking up just yet. We'll just have to wait for that. But editorially, it's happening. And then I've got my publisher, who I worked with on the Harris Tweed and the Distilleries book. We're going to work on another project for that. And then trying to get a documentary sorted out about historic women. So there's a lady I'm talking to, trying to get that sorted out, but that takes a few years, takes a good couple of years to get a documentary sorted out. So there's a few things going on, but slowly, just have to ease our way back into life again.
Ease our way back into it. Well, definitely keep us updated. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really interesting talking to you.